And we are back. Welcome to the Soapbox, where people who work, volunteer, and care about recovery tell us who they are and what they are most passionate about. My name is Rich Jones, and I'm your host. And I represent Parenting Your Child in Recovery.com and the home website, secondstarts.com. That's number 2, NDSTARTS.com. Today, my guest is Julie Cyvonne. Julie is a psychedelic facilitator, a breathwork practitioner, and a certified coach. Julie, hello, and thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I am too. I'm excited because we were just discussing this is a lot of education for me, and I hope that people are listening get educated to something that can be very useful. Julie, I like to start every show off with asking the person to just give me the Cliff Notes version of who you are, and with you, I want you to also add in really your definition of what a psychedelic facilitator is, and then tell us your road to how you even got here.
Okay, Cliff Notes version. Hi, everyone. I am Julie. I am 33. I live in the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest, but I've lived all over. I am a cat and a dog mom, a yogi, and I love to read. Okay. I am a psychedelic facilitator. A psychedelic facilitator is someone who intentionally leads people through psychedelic experiences that can be big and small. So microdosing, taking a sub-perceptual amount of a substance in order to produce positive changes and effects in the brain without leading to any sort of cognitive or visual impairments, somatic impairments, nothing like if you were to have, a glass of wine, to have a cannabis edible, even a Benadryl, right? A Benadryl will make you feel something. It makes you feel drowsy, lethargic. So it's truly sub-perceptual, meaning you're not going to feel any of that. And it's also guiding people through larger experience as well, which is more typically what people associate with psychedelics, but not in a way of like, I'm going to a rave and I'm taking illicit substances. This is for the true purpose of healing. And I got to this path. I used to be an attorney. And I really struggled with anxiety, depression. I really struggled with substance use as well. I knew that my life was not sustainable the way that it was going, the way that I was spending my time. And I wasn't happy, right? The reason that I was drawn to these substances and I was using them the way that I was because I really was not happy with how I was living, my profession, any of my life up to that point. I never really stopped to think like, what do I want? And I took a big step back. I got certified to coach initially, which was amazing. I love coaching. I love what it's done for me and for others, but I still really struggle with some baseline of anxiety and depression. And I thought there has to be a way to truly heal this, not just mask the symptom, not just like, grin and bear it, but a true way to heal. And that is what brought me into psychedelics originally. It was never my intention to get into facilitation, but it became something that was sort of undeniable that people wanted from me and that I was really passionate about in terms of learning and educating myself on what this is, why it works, how to do it. And so for the last 4 years, this has been my work. I love it. I'm super passionate about it. I see how fast, effective, sustainable it is for people. And that's who I am and how I got here.
Okay, great. Before we even go off of that, for my clarification, explain to me, if I don't know anything about this, a psychedelic?
A psychedelic is really anything that changes your perception. And that might sound scary. It might sound like Alice in Wonderland, changing your perception, seeing this big caterpillar smoking hookah, right? But a change in perception can even be like viewing a problem in a different way. So I like to say psychedelic use can help us find novel solutions to persistent problems. And that isn't just, some healing something within yourself or looking at your past in a different way, but that can literally be like solving a puzzle in a different way, because it helps us take in more information of our surroundings. Adults have lived this long because our brain are running certain algorithms that's helping us form conclusions. It's taking in the least amount of information possible in order to preserve our brain power. Our brain is our biggest caloric spend.
Okay.
If we aren't making sure that, we're able to perform these low temperature searches, we would be so tired. We'd be so hungry because we'd be constantly, every day would be new, right? It's kind of like that movie 50 First Dates.
Okay.
And if you can take in less amount of information, obviously that's advantageous evolutionarily. However,
Right.
that's not advantageous if we're looking
Right.
to really expand, create those new solutions. And so children just naturally perform high
Okay.
temperature searches. And adults, when they use psychedelics, can start to perform more high temperature searches. And that's kind of why we get that phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, because the dog just wants to do what
Okay.
it knows to do.
So give me an example physically of what you would call a psychedelic, because people, what is a psychedelic? I mean, in my mind, only thing I can think of is mushrooms.
So when you
But
say physically, you just mean like give me examples of like known psychedelics that people might be.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
cool. Yep. So mushrooms, aka psilocybin,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's not necessarily the mushroom itself, because you eat mushrooms on pizza. I'm sure a
Right.
lot of people use functional mushrooms, but it is a specific kind of mushroom. It's called a psilocybe, and it contains psilocybin.
Okay.
Another known psychedelic is LSD.
Okay.
That is it's actually derived from a fungus as well. The fungus is called ergot.
Mhm.
A lot of people would say things like ayahuasca live in the family of psychedelics.
Okay. Understood.
Peyote comes from a
Okay.
cactus.
Okay. All right. Okay. Before we move on, I want to remind everybody that we will have some more of Julie's information, how to contact her, and some of our programs in the show notes. So be sure to make sure you check those out. And in the bottom of those show notes, I want you to note that if you are the parent or mentor or the practitioner, or you love or care someone, a young adult, then and they may be at risk or in trouble or in some current type of rehabilitation, we have a non-clinical program that accelerates and multiplies results, leading to a more permanent recovery. There'll be links for support people and links for practitioners in the bottom under Julie's notes. Okay, Julie, this is the part where I get to put you up on the soapbox, and we're going to ask you some questions and get your ideas so we can, really hone in on what you do and what you're talking about. The first thing I want to ask you is, explain to me in your mind, why or how are psychedelics misunderstood? What's the misunderstanding here?
Yeah, so when I think about why, that feels pretty clear. So
Mhm.
psychedelics, well, mushrooms in particular, were brought to the United States in the 1950s. This writer went down to Oaxaca, which is a state in Mexico, and he wanted to find this woman who was a facilitator. Well, facilitator is not even the right word. Like, that was in her indigenous practice, right?
Okay.
Like, he was a medicine woman of that tribe, and he had been really curious about having a psychedelic experience, having this experience with mushrooms. So he went down, he had this experience with her. It's actually a very sad story. He completely like blew up her life. He wrote about her, and then everyone's going down there and like ruining the ecosystem of her village.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he brought awareness to the fact that this was out there, that this was happening. And when research began in the 1950s and the 1960s in the United States, it was all around addiction treatment. So
Okay.
psychedelics are actually the only substance on the Schedule 1 list, so psilocybin and LSD, that are non-addictive and non-toxic. There is a negligible chance of toxicity, which in that schedule just refers to like something's ability to kill you, right? So you look at
Okay.
alcohol, obviously high toxicity. Even
Right.
something like ibuprofen has a higher toxicity level than psychedelics.
Okay.
And there's a lot of really interesting research about how psychedelics can help you break those associations and those habitual behaviors, like the ones we see in addiction. And brains that experience addiction and experience anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, they're all really similar, and they all have a lot of rigidity, meaning they kind of go down the same well-worn path over and over again, which totally makes sense, right? If you're struggling to break the habit of drinking, the addictive behavior of drinking, then your brain is just defaulting there. So it's really like not so much a you thing as it is like your brain also isn't working for you, right? You're overcoming like another barrier. So that's where the research started. And then this is all well documented. Like,
Okay.
this is not my theory. You can
Mhm.
go ahead, and your listeners can go ahead and look at CIA and FBI documents that have been released in the recent years. But MK Ultra is a well-known experiment from the CIA where they were dosing people without their consent, without their knowledge, with LSD as a sort of social experiment to see if they could use psychedelics as a truth serum, as a way to, as like as a component of war, like a weapon of war to take to other countries. We were thinking about like getting involved in Korea and Vietnam at the time. So they're going around. This is in San Francisco. The government is dosing people without their knowledge. And what they find is that people are not suddenly like confessing their deepest, darkest secrets and telling the truth. But we do at the same time have this sort of like awakening of the public to question, why are we doing this? Like, why is the government getting involved in these conflicts? Like, what is really going on with the government?
Right.
Up until that point, we had all just kind of been like along for the ride and just assuming best intentions on part of the government. And so when all of this happened, the CIA also started to pump out all this propaganda, right? So I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard, because I have heard, when I went through the DARE program when I was 5, like psychedelics scramble your brain, they melt your face off. You're going to think that you can fly and jump off a building and accidentally end your life. All of those things are stories that the government put out there that aren't true. So the government fed us all this propaganda. The government didn't get the result they wanted from the experiment. And in fact, they got a generation of people who were more open-minded, more questioning, more wanting to get straight answers and push the box. And then they decided to demonize these substances so that people wouldn't do them ultimately. And I am not like Miss, government conspiracy type person, but I do think that people in power benefit from people not asking questions, rolling over, just taking what they're fed as the truth. And these substances can open up our minds to think in different ways.
Okay. All right. And in my mind, with my little bit of information, I would think that that's where I think you automatically think of the native people using those things for mind-opening experiences and things of that nature. So that's kind of one half of the way we think about it as we've been taught. We got the good part, and then we've got the bad part that we've also been fed. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Tell me exactly how you see psychedelics fitting into the recovery space, though.
Yeah, so I've actually worked with quite a few people in recovery, and obviously I keep all of my work private, and meaning like I don't share people's informations or names. Like even if you go to my page, you might see me talk about people's results, but I'm never going to tag them or share their name without permission, because I know this is something that is still controversial and that people want to be, sort of shielded against in terms of public like speculation. But I also know recovery is a very private thing. And I've heard a lot of feedback from people in recovery saying like microdosing has really helped me stay sober and to be a present and loving mother and to, to help me rewire my brain so I'm not so pressed down that path of wanting to drink, wanting to smoke, etc. But I know that like the recovery community hasn't been super open to it, right? And it's not my place to judge anyone's sobriety or to say what that means or to define that for anyone else. Like they have to define it for themselves. But I know for a lot of people, it has helped them stay sober from whatever the thing was that they got clean from, whether it be alcohol, whether it be heroin, or whether it be opioids. And there's been a lot of pushback from their recovery communities and even some sort of like excommunication if they're open about that, which makes me sad because again, originally the original research was about addiction. There's a lot of well-documented studies that say that psychedelic use can help us break addiction, can help us permanently heal addiction, can close that loop for people. And if that is a tool that can help people and it's truly subperceptual, this idea of microdosing, right? If microdosing is truly subperceptual, if you're not even going to feel it, if it's going to feel less than a Benadryl, then again, it's not my job to define anyone's sobriety, but if it fits within the scope of their sobriety and it helps them, like that's to me is what matters. And it's really beautiful to see that people have been able to stay sober from alcohol, etc., with the use of microdosing as a tool.
Okay. Explain to me, so I can be more clear, the term microdosing. What is that? What do you mean?
So, when you look at microdosing, and you can microdose a variety of things, right? It's not just psychedelics. People are microdosing like these new GLP-1s, right? So a dose is whatever a standardized amount of a substance is. So, a dose of, I'm just going to come back to Benadryl because we've been talking about, a dose of Benadryl is different than a dose of ibuprofen, is different than a dose of Claritin, whatever. All of these things have an individual dose. So every psychedelic also has like a normal dose, a normal dose size, and a microdose is a fraction of that dose size. So in this case, it's anywhere from 1/10 to 1/20th of a normal dose.
Okay.
That you would take in order to, again, not have any of the perception effects, but to still produce the positive effects in the brain. And when we look at positive effects in the brain for psychedelics, we're looking at increased neuroplasticity, which is basically our ability to modulate different connections in the brain, subtraction, addition, strengthening of existing ones. And it's also quieting down parts of our brain that chatter, that feed into these loops, the same like rigidity and the patterns that we've been talking about. If we can weaken those bonds, weaken that activity, then we can allow our brain the opportunity to move in a new way. Literally, when I say move, I mean like energy is directed in a new way. So we're not defaulting down the path of, you know, that overwhelming feeling of I need to have a drink, and we can move into the feeling of, oh, maybe like I'll go for a walk at this time instead. I'll step away, I'll recenter myself, I'll come back, and that feeling will be less.
Okay. Oh, all right. Thank you for that explanation. Talk to me about, in your estimation, the role that shame plays or doesn't play in recovery and healing.
Yeah, I've had a lot of experiences in my life that I am not proud of. And I think that's probably true for most people, right? But not everyone's willing to talk about it, whether or not that, addiction is something that you deal with, you experience. I think everyone's done some things, said some things that like, hey, I wish I could turn back the time and take that one back. And up until about 5 years ago, I really struggled with shame. And I also think guilt is a big thing that we learn from our familial structures and our social structure. So I grew up Catholic. I don't know if anyone out there in the audience can relate, but I have a Catholic mother who loves to try to guilt trip me. And so I learned that from an early age of like, guilt is supposedly an effective way to change behavior, right? Or at least, the Catholic moms out there think it is. They think they're going to guilt their children and then they're suddenly going to behave different. And I had this big, I don't want to say awakening, because I think some people like associate that word with, something else. But I had this big like aha moment of thinking like, wow, you know what isn't and has never been effective in my life? Shaming myself about something, guilt tripping myself, or experiencing that from someone else. And so I got more into like the research around that. I really like the research, as you can tell. And so from a behavioral standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, shame is not an effective teacher. Guilt is not an effective teacher. We look at, B.F. Skinner, punishment versus reward. What's going to actually encourage someone to do something differently? And then I started researching Dr. Hawkins and his work with the HeartMath Institute, where he basically measured the frequency of emotions, right? The energy of certain emotions. So when you look at something like love, joy, bliss, these are like, they have a lot of energy behind them, right? They're really like high frequency, literally, when you tap into the energy of them. Something like neutrality or even curiosity is kind of like at a zero. It's not giving you a lot of energy, but it's also not taking it away. But if you look at things like shame, guilt, and judgment, they're the lowest of the low, and they're actually like sucking energy. Their frequency is negative. And I started to think about, okay, what does that mean? Well, if you look at someone, and I think one of the clearest examples is like someone who struggles with binge eating or eating, more than they'd want to, specifically at night. So if this woman is thinking like, okay, I want to stop breaking this habit of eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's at night. And then she sits down on the couch, it's 8:00, and she does it. And she gets into this mindset of like, oh my God, I suck. Like, I hate my body. I'm never going to be able to lose this weight. Like, why do I do this? I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. All of these thoughts, or she's shaming herself, she's guilting herself. Because they are such low frequency, they're keeping her stuck in the energy of that experience. She's more likely to do it again the next night because nothing can change. Whereas if she were to meet that experience with neutrality and observation of saying like, okay, I said I didn't want to do this. I did it anyway. Like, it is done. And then getting curious with herself of, okay, well, what are the things that I'm doing that are kind of setting me up for failure in this realm? Oh, well, maybe it's that I sit down at the couch and I'm like going again to the same well-worn ridge in my brain and creating the same behavioral experience over and over again. that's where you can actually start to move and you can start to experience a different outcome because you're not stuck in the shame and the guilt spiral. I mean, ultimately, best case scenario, she sits down and thinks, I'm amazing anyway. Like, I still love myself. My worth is not dependent on like what I eat or my weight, but that can feel really like unrealistic for a lot of people.
Mhm.
So I just say, instead of like beating yourself up, if you can just get to a point of like acknowledging what is from a factual perspective with no sort of emotion behind it, and
Right.
then getting curious about like what led to that, you're going to have a lot more ability and energy to shift than if you were just like telling yourself a really crappy story about how much you suck.
You got it. Oh, okay. Understood. Very well. One more thing I want you to go through for me. And you mentioned this in your notes to me. I found it fascinating. As far as addiction, basically as classified as a disconnection. Talk to me about that. Your thoughts on that.
So my mom is in recovery. My mom has been in recovery for almost 48 years. She's been sober, and her definition of sobriety is very, very strict. Like, not even a painkiller if a doctor were to prescribe it to her. So she
Okay.
is like, I don't know, we'll call it like bone dry, right?
Right.
And my mom's really of the view that like addiction is this like almost like a gene. Like it's just is what it is. She has this thing. And I love my mom, and I think everyone's entitled to their own perspective. I also think like, well, if that's true, my mom is in recovery. My dad definitely had a drinking problem as well. My whole family on both sides is like full of drinking issues. And I do know that my drinking was an issue when I was an attorney. I can drink now and I can have a couple glasses of wine and I can stop myself. Like I don't even say stop myself. Like I don't want to keep going in the way that
Right.
I used to. So when I hear her say that, I think like, I don't know that I really subscribe to like, it's just a gene or like it is some sort of mechanism in your brain, because at the end of the day, I had to get really clear with myself and my own like inner dialogue and to heal some past traumas. And I realized like the reason I drank the way I used to drink was because I just wanted to tune myself out. I wanted to shut my brain down. I wanted to stop thinking all the things and feeling all the things. And alcohol gave me an opportunity to not think about it for a while, to like be fun and silly in the moment. And of course, like it sucks after and you have the anxiety and all this stuff. But once I wasn't afraid to sit with myself, once I like
Right.
cleaned up essentially inside and was more okay being with myself, I don't want to get to that point anymore. I don't like drinking like in excess. I really don't like the feeling afterwards, and I don't need it to be able to enjoy my inner landscape. So, again, I think everyone's entitled to their view or perspective, but I think once you can learn to be more connected and safety to yourself and heal and sort of like tend to your inner garden, then you can connect with yourself and you don't need the alcohol to provide the off switch or whatever, like whatever your preferred method is.
Okay. Understood. Okay. We'll remind everybody in the show notes, we're going to give you some information to connect to Julie and get some of these facts in those show notes. You said a lot of interesting things, and I would love to reference some of the things. I'm going to try to dig that out, as a matter of fact, because I find that highly interesting. So remember, check the show notes out. Also in the show notes, if you are a parent, mentor, or a practitioner who loves or cares or works with a young adult family, parenting your child in recovery.com is a non-clinical option that accelerates and multiplies your results. Support people, check the notes, and there's also a separate area for practitioners for a referral to check the notes also. Okay, Julie, I want to talk to you about some of the things you've got programs. I'm going to go down here. Talk to me about the retreats. I find that interesting. What goes on in a retreat?
Yeah, so my retreats are the opportunity for people to have a larger guided intentional experience in a therapeutic setting. I'm not a therapist, but if you were to read the literature, you're probably like, does this girl only read research studies? But if you were to read a research study about psychedelic treatment and psychedelic therapy, you would see that people come to a lab and they are administered a dose of psilocybin and they lay down with an eye mask, music is playing, and they sort of play out their inner movie or experience, right? So this isn't, again, I'm going to the concert, I'm at a rave, I'm being dangerous or like around a group of people that are drinking. It is a very like intentional therapeutic experience. So it is 5 to 6 women. They all come. And it's not just a psychedelic experience. There's breath work. There's lots of integration. That is really my main focus in my business. There's connection. There's opportunities to experience the beautiful surroundings because they have them in amazing locations, everywhere from like Mexico to Lake Tahoe.
Okay.
And they are meant to build connection amongst the women, right? Like I keep them small for a reason, for women to show up to heal, to move through whatever, trauma they want to like let go of in their life. And also, I've had a lot of doctors who've come to these things and said like, I just want to know what this is like. I'm very
Okay.
curious from my medical perspective and I want to have a psychedelic experience. And
Okay.
I'm like, come on down. Like I will show you. It's really beautiful.
Okay. How's that different from a group program? Is that the same thing or the retreat's different?
Very, very different. So
Okay.
everything that wouldn't be in person with me is microdosing, right? So if you're going to take a larger dose, I'm going to be there. I'm going to like lead you through the experience. I've never had anyone have a bad experience. And there's actually a lot of research around why that is. If you control for 2 things called set and setting, the likelihood of having a negative experience is almost negligible. So set is your mindset when you go into the experience. Setting is the actual environment you're in, which is why I make sure, people come before the experience itself so they feel comfortable with one another. They are able to relax and, feel calm in where they are. And then everything that I'm saying is intended to help you feel more comfortable in the experience. So I give everyone instructions and I answer all the questions and we talk about the fears. So in person, larger experience, everything else, group programs, one-on-one coaching, DIY programs, all of that is focused around microdosing.
Real quickly, tell me, with a do-it-yourself program, how does that work?
Yeah, I think I'll tell you about my most popular program, which is it's delivered via text. Every single day you receive a text message and it is a habit stacking microdosing program. So
Okay.
I'll just walk you through kind of if you were to like sign up for the program, you get an email and there's all of the different companies that I personally guarantee and recommend. There are 3 different companies that I work with in the United States and 1 in Canada for all my Canadian listeners out there. And so you order the capsules and I tell you, okay, this is the dose, like this is what you should order. I recommend X, Y, and Z. And then there's 3 different videos you watch. The first video is about like how you set up your microdosing practice. Like, what does that mean? How do you be intentional about it? How do you set an intention around it? The next video is letting you know about the program. So every single day you're going to receive a text message and every single day it's going to be a new habit and it's a habit stacking program. So the first week is all like mindset and language stuff. So it's pretty like, we'll say like low heavy lifting, right? It's very doable, but instead of just doing something for one day and letting it go, you carry it on the next day. So every week there's 4 new habits. And then the third week is really cool. One of the videos is specifically about this, but you take a quiz to find out the unique ways that you self-sabotage. Everyone self-sabotages, but everyone's flavor is a little bit different.
Right.
And so then the third week of text is specifically designed and delivered to reflect your specific top saboteurs. So that's a really fun feature of it. So it's something where you go through it. There's training videos. If anyone has any questions, of course, like they could always email me. But if you want to like have more live support with me, like live coaching and feedback, that is another avenue.
Okay, very good, very good. I want to thank you. I remind everybody that the show notes are going to be thick and full of heavy ways for you to understand what Julie's talking about and ways to get in touch with her, experience her programs. We put the website up there and some contact information right there. So I hope you take advantage of that. I just want to say before we close that I appreciate you coming on here. One of the things you said that really sparks my mind is the fact that this show is about talking about different ways and different mindsets toward recovery. So, yes, I understand that maybe the recovery community may not always embrace certain things, but the recovery community is like that sometimes. They're a little staunch and a little, for my taste anyway. So I love to, expand our mind and expand, what we see and how we do and how we see things. 'Cause everybody's different, and what works for one may not work for another. So I really appreciate you for coming on. And I want to thank you so much. And good luck to you. And I'll be keeping an eye on you. Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. For Julie and myself, I want to remind everybody, I want you to go out there and help somebody get better, help somebody stay better, and most importantly, help somebody be better.